People don't give up. I guess that's in the end of the day, that's what makes me optimistic.
Andrew Parkin, what makes you optimistic?
For me, it's just young people.
How do you maintain your optimism?
I think it's partly in my nature. I just tend to look at the world in a glass half full kind of.
Hi, it's Victor Perton here at the Centre for Optimism, and it's our Optimism Cafe. And today I am delighted to introduce Andrew Parkin to you, the Executive Director at the Environics Institute for Survey Research. From Canada, welcome, Andrew.
Hello.
It's really great to have you here. And what we always do at the Centre for Optimism is the first question we always ask our guests is, what makes you optimistic? So Andrew Parkin, what makes you optimistic?
Well, thanks for having me and for asking me the question. I think for me, it's just young people. I guess there are still some in the world who think that younger adults today sort of have it easy compared to how tough things were in the past. I think that's completely backwards. I think it's much more difficult for people to come of age and to become adults and move through education and move into work and cope with everything that's going on today. And yet people are doing it amazingly well. And they are changing, they are demanding, they are moving things forward. And so that's what makes me optimistic.
That is stunning. That is just beautiful. We often get looking at life through the eyes of a child, but as you say, young adults are navigating themselves through an increasingly complex world and making a difference. So how do you maintain your optimism? Some people meditate, some people do it through exercise. I do it by asking people what makes you optimistic. How do you maintain your optimism?
Well, it's certainly been harder this year than otherwise. I think it's partly in my nature. I just tend to look at the world in a glass half full kind of way, and always have. So I'm lucky enough that I don't, I guess, have to work at it as consciously maybe as others. At the same time, I guess I just I gravitate to. Like a lot of people, you can choose to read and dwell on the negative, or you can choose to find the positive. So I guess I just hunt for the information that I can find encouraging.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. In fact, I did actually another interview with Paula Allen the other day from Morneau Chappelle, and she said one of the things that is dragging down optimism in Australia and Canada is the change of the news to being excessively negative rather than a 50-50 positive. So look, one of the magnificent things you've done this year is your Better Canada study. Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. Well, so one of the surveys we did in 2020, we did it with our friends at Vancity, which is a credit union here in Canada. And we wanted to see essentially what the outlook of Canadians was in a very difficult year. We started with the question of whether that outlook was changing. Was it, obviously getting less optimistic given everything that was going on? But we were optimistic enough when we did the survey that we were looking ahead to an eventual recovery. And a number of the questions we asked were about what people wanted to move into, what they hoped the country would look like afterwards. So that was the nature of the study. And one of the things that we found that I think surprised us a little bit is that obviously if you ask people right now, how is the economy going in the middle of a shutdown, people will say it's negative, and more likely to say that than they were before it. That's obvious. But if you go beyond that, there actually had been very little change in people's outlook over the course of the year in terms of their sort of more deep-rooted sense of the way the world was going, which doesn't mean that everyone was positive. It just meant that the sort of breakdown of more or less positive was similar to what we'd seen before. A number of people feel they can, deal with adversity. Unfortunately, a number of people think it's much more difficult. But again, the point is that in 2020, so far that hasn't been much more different than it was before. So overall, the pandemic has not shaken things up as much as one might have expected.
Yeah. And I think one of the findings you made was that optimism was strongest in the young and strongest in the older. It sort of
Yes.
dipped in
Yeah.
the middle. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. Yeah. So in terms of, and it's actually that sort of pattern held across a range of items. So certainly hopes for change. You know, to what extent do you think we can deal with issues like inequality or climate change? But also a degree of engagement. So to what extent are you involved in either a community group or a discussion online or contacting your representative and so on? So both optimism and engagement, and in some cases, sort of confidence about the way things were going. As you said, they were highest among our youngest adults, the people at sort of 18 to 30 roughly. But they were sort of second highest among our seniors. So you know, often when you look at these things, you just sort of see a line on the graph goes like this: youngest to oldest or oldest to youngest. But as you said, this one is a curve like that. I think, you know, I take two things away from that. One is I think it is encouraging that our youngest generation is the most optimistic and the most engaged. Um, at the same time, I think if you do want to be even-handed and look at the other side of the coin, I think it shows that those who are I mean, middle-aged is a term no one really gravitates towards, but essentially those who are, you know, in their core working years, more likely to have children at home and so on, are the most likely to be finding things difficult right now. And you know, I think we need to celebrate the optimism of youth, but realize that this is probably an indication also that you know, the middle generations, they don't have as much time to be engaged with, you know, issues outside of their day-to-day.
Yeah, so if we want to get them messages of hope and optimism, we've probably got to improve the ways we deliver it to them so they feel a little bit more in control. I guess if you've got teenagers at home and navigating school and all of those sorts of things, you know, it's you feel pressed upon, don't you?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and just the realities of, you know, everything from juggling work and your children's school to the affordability of housing in this country to, uh, you know, wondering about what decisions governments are making about taxes and so on. All of those, I think, hit those middle age groups the most.
And when you look at the results and where people feel they have agency to make change in government policy or change in the way of the world, what were the high points, both amongst the young and the old? Where did they feel they could make change?
Um, well, one of the things that, again, it surprised me a little is we asked about the local level, the regional level, and the national level. And like Australia, we're a federation, so we have very strong state governments or provincial governments for us. And we wondered if it would stack, that people would feel some agency locally, but sort of the further away you got, the weaker it would get. And that actually didn't happen. So it doesn't depend on which level of government. So that's one aspect. I think maybe to answer the question a little differently, I think that Canadians are probably feeling we're making more progress on some types of inequality, but less on others. So when it comes to certainly gender equality, I think we Canadians are the most sort of optimistic or confident about our ability to make progress. And after that becomes sort of ethnic or racial equality, which doesn't mean that we think we've gotten there, but I think there's some sense that we're on the right path. But much less of a positive outlook around economic issues and economic inequality. So when it comes to, I guess, the nuts and bolts of how the economy works and how resources are distributed in the country, that's where I think people feel they have less of a sense of agency and less of a sort of way forward to make improvements in that.
And so, from the research, what makes you most optimistic for Canada for 2021 and beyond?
Well, just the fact that I think, you know, the theme for me that comes out of this research and other research that we've done over the course of the year, I think is a theme of sort of openness and generosity. That across a number of questions this year, Canadians with the crisis, that both the health crisis and the economic crisis, you could sort of say the door was open to Canadians turning both inward and against one another, in the context of extreme pressure. And that absolutely did not happen. In fact, if anything happened, Canadians moved in the direction of greater openness, greater generosity, concern for those less fortunate, continued support for immigration, heightened concern around racism in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement. So, there was, I guess what I'm saying is that the pandemic could have provided this excuse, to not be as generous as we would like. And Canadians didn't opt for that easy way out, I think, and stuck to the direction that I think most in the country want to head in, and that's to me, I think, profoundly reassuring and encouraging.
And for the world, what makes you optimistic for the world in general, 2021 and beyond?
Well, that is a tougher question, I think. Because it is a difficult time, both because of the pandemic, but there's the other issues around climate change and geopolitics and so on. But people don't give up. I guess that's, in the end of the day, that's what makes me optimistic. Whether it's with the research that drives us towards vaccines, or whether it's the countless thousands and millions who protested against racism over the course of 2020, the tenacity of people. I think you have to turn to that as the source of optimism.
I had a funny interview sort of middle of the year, and someone said, "Oh, Australian business will never have seen things tougher." And I said, "Well, we've got people living amongst us who came from Europe, where everything was bombed in World War II. We have people from Iraq, Iran, Vietnam, all of whom experienced destruction and bushfires and floods." And so I said, look, we've actually got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who've gone through that experience. And if we can use their wisdom to help us pass through. And here in Melbourne, of course, we had the longest lockdown of any city in the world. And look, it was tough. I think everyone's ending the year pretty tired. But nevertheless, we've reached now almost 2 months of zero COVID from, a community, not 100%, cooperative, but, 95% of people congenially doing their best, as you say, getting to know their neighbours better, meeting up on Zoom, accepting the fact that you couldn't travel out of Melbourne, out of the borders of Melbourne. So yeah, for me, it's much the same to see this resilience, this generosity. As Nietzsche said, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. I think has proved to be the case this year.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly we look at your COVID numbers enviously now, as we have unfortunately not been heading down to zero, but heading in the opposite direction. But hopefully we'll get there soon.
Exactly. Well, Andrew Parkin, this has been fantastic. I've so appreciated you sharing your wisdom. And this survey, will it be ongoing in 2021?
Well, we'll have other studies, new studies, but covering many of the same themes. And people can just Google Environics Institute. They'll land on our webpage, and if they're interested in Canada, they'll find lots of information there to keep them busy.
Well, if we can add to your numbers, because we've got now 5,000 subscribers in 69 countries. So if we can add to your numbers and help you with your surveys where they pertain to optimism, you've now got a fan club amongst the Centre for Optimism and its members. Andrew Parkin, all the best for Christmas, all the best for 2021, and thank you for your time today.
Thanks again for having me, and best wishes for the new year.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode of the Optimism Cafe as much as we did. Please get involved with the Centre for Optimism. There's lots on our website at centreforoptimism.com. Please sign up either for a free alert or join up as a member, and we'd appreciate you becoming part of our family of optimists.